too much speech. What are you doing Sunday? Do you go to church? St. Teresa's Catholic Church.
Oh, what? You're going to church?
I'm going into the church that's on the south side of town. You know that one on Little.
The one that still is keeping your mind.
Yes.
Why?
Because we're doing an observation paper and a release on the third in that church. Actually, you want to, I think Kyle said. You didn't leave?
That's not.
No, literally. Yeah.
You want to get people to go back to Friday morning or not?
I don't care.
The optional, so I'm running it, so it would be like school. October 20th, 2024.
Hey, I'm trying to get my speech in here. You don't get
I'm
your speech in
leaving.
here. Then don't say it on the way out.
ABC.
Blah, 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 blah.
2024.
Oh my God.
October 18th.
Just make sure you're in the library a little before 6:30, okay?
Okay.
would go first.
I go
Okay, so
first.
like, she's what?
We're pretty much first.
She's like the first.
Yeah. It's live right now. Your grandma would
Blair's in this room. My brother, Blair. Blair. Yes. My brother, I thought my brother was trying to give me a high five and say hi to me, but no, he was just coming to talk to you. Yeah. Yeah, no, we have different names, so like, you know, like, guys like. My last Okay, so.
Am I in the, I don't know.
Like, grade school.
Yeah.
Grade school. My mom.
Scout is one of them. It's literally like, and like these people here are like blocking if they sit up here. I do feel like.
I kind of think it would be nice to have it,
Okay.
because it'll be higher and you'll be able to see better.
Do we bring this?
Yeah.
I just pressed a number.
Oh. Nothing.
There, that's better.
This does shake really
But it's really good.
Cut it. You can color it. Very nice.
Shopping, I'm like, hey,
Can we start? Is everything in? I'll check the whole.
My mother and brother and stuff.
They're waiting.
They're waiting for my stuff, so if you like to see a group of like 3 people out there, leave them outside.
No, it's wherever you get it. I just. Today, I forgot it. Okay, we're gonna get started. What are you looking for? Oh, a chair? Okay, you can sit. Just a reminder to silence your cell phones. They can be distracting when you're giving a speech, so just remember that. Don't get up, try not to get up, like when people are giving speeches, and I will be the person, I'll open the door through, like, in between each person, so that you can go in and out. Thank you. Okay, so first is, I'm Zuri Moore, I'm a senior, and I'm doing persuasive speaking. I have 10 minutes to persuade you on a topic. It's a pretty informative speech, so be ready. Okay. I was born in sunny California. Some of my earliest memories are shoveling seaweed into my mouth and complimenting that with sand,
Since then, I have been captivated by the ocean. Some of my earliest storybooks would recite one message, though. They would say, "The sea is a dangerous place. We see the Kraken before us, his large tentacles dragging a sailor to his death. The Leviathan surfaces, his slender body corrupting the dark, lapsing waves below. Your treasure aboard tempts him. The most intimidating of maritime creatures appears. He preys on the lives of his crewmates and lives in the shadow of each wave. Mankind lends itself as the cruelest creature. Abuse and corruption lay in every corner of the world, and the fishing industry hides the most monsters. To begin, I will guide you through the current state of the fishing industry on an industrial and economic scale. Next, I'll open your eyes to the exploitations within this industry and its multifaceted effects. And finally, I'll show you how we can achieve sustainable fishing practices and humane workers' rights. As humanity's progressed, we've learned the truth about all of these monsters. They aren't supposed to be real. So why do we linger as the cruelest creatures at sea? Unless you're familiar with the fishing industry or have a very colorful, salty palate, you may be unfamiliar with the popularity fish has throughout the world. Once a coastal delight, seafood has become widespread across the planet, landlocked or not. According to Our World in Data, an organization dedicated to collecting data to stand against the world's issues, published 2024, the global consumption of fish has quadrupled in the past 60 years. This is created as the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, known as the FAO, estimates the 58 million people who are employed in the direct processing of fish, the 600 million people who rely on fisheries and aquacultures to sustain their livelihoods, and in 2019, the 3.3 billion people who got 20% of their animal protein from fish. One country involved in employing millions and providing much of the world's fish is the People's Republic of China. World Bank states in a 2021 article that China produces the most fish by catch and farm than any other country in the world, by almost 4 times as much, clocking in at 85 million metric tons. The World Population Review, a peer-reviewed journal on social demography published 2024, states China is in first place, with countries like Indonesia, India, and Peru following. The United States finds itself in 7th place, with almost 5 million metric tons produced. But a more prominent statistic lies within importing, where the United States is the #1 importer of fish, with $85 billion metric dollars worth of in 2022, states the Observatory of Economic Complexity. With this rise in demand, the systems in which fish are collected have become less and less humane. To be stuck at sea means to be surrounded by boundless waters and to be visited by only one's reflection in the waves. Land may be just beyond the horizon or hundreds of miles away. One thing is certain. Your life is far from guaranteed if you enter the water. This is how up to 100,000 people are currently enslaved in the fishing industry, states Lewis and Clark Law School 2021. Fishermen aboard these vessels report illness, psychological and physical abuse, sexual assault, and death of their own crewmates. The International Labor Association states fishermen are more vulnerable to forced labor because of their lack of formal education, language barriers, and meager enforcement of regulations. This lack of enforcement has created a variety of issues. Paired with cheap labor and the total freedom to fish, industrial ships often deplete and outcompete local fishing communities. This has created a variety of effects on the markets. The Senegalese markets have felt these effects similarly to many of their neighboring countries. Their once bountiful waters are now barren, forcing many native Senegalese to move to neighboring countries in an attempt to sustain their livelihoods, leaving everything they once loved behind. This competition puts not only pressure on people, but also on marine life. According to the previously cited FAO, from the 1990s to 2017, there has been an increase from 10% of fish in unsustainable levels to 35.4%. A striking example lies within the Mediterranean Sea, the most overfished waters in the world, with 62% of its fish overfished or at risk for depletion, states Oceana in 2018. One contributor to the ocean's decline has been trawling. Trawling is the legal practice of dragging nets at varying depths of the ocean and catching all local fish, marine mammals, and marine structures like corals. These creatures that are unintended to be caught, but are called bycatch. And according to Oceana Central America, in the cases of trawling, up to 90% of the overall catch is bycatch. But in all types of fishing, still over 40% of the overall catch is bycatch. The ecological effects and human rights violations perpetrated by the fishing industry are abhorrent, and they should not be allowed to run our waters with so little regard for life. But all hope is not lost. Even in the past few years, steps have been taken to achieve a healthier ocean and people. The International Labor Association states that their plans to end forced labor in the fishing industry are to support countries in their regulation enforcement concerning ships that fly their flags and dock in their ports. This will ensure international and national laws are followed. But not everybody has such formal ways of creating change. The Sea Shepherds are an organization that decided they were tired of sitting around and spouting rules instead of enforcing them. As captured by the Outlaw Ocean, published by accredited journalist Ian Urbina in 2019, the Sea Shepherds were involved in the world's longest chase of a poaching vessel named Thunder for over 10,000 nautical miles. Thunder was an illegal ship involved in smuggling billions of dollars of Chilean sea bass and had been evading capture for decades. Their deadly chase only came to an end when the Thunder began its miraculous descent to the bottom of the ocean, a purposeful ploy to get rid of evidence. With the crew captured and the evidence collected on the sinking boat, the Thunder's owners were fined $10 million, a win for not only the Sea Shepherds, but for our oceans. Until we can all become ecological warriors at sea, we can use our position as consumers to create change. Unity Environmental University states that because of overfishing, species like shark, halibut, and tuna should be avoided at all costs. Be conscious of where your fish comes from and opt for local foods. In Triple Landlocked, Nebraska, it may be a wiser choice to buy beef. Visit your local hatcheries like the one in Royal, Nebraska to learn firsthand how the fish around you are sourced and support bills or propositions that plan to keep our waters safe. As I speak now, I look around the room and see the bright minds. Together, we can create a future where the exploitations perpetrated by the fishing industry are just a problem of the past. Sea monsters used to haunt the minds of all who were brave enough to call the sea their home. Now it may not be monsters that consume their thoughts, but the industrial ship that hunts in their waters. The fishing industry is a cruel trade, and action must be brought against it. To begin, I guided you through the current state of the fishing industry on an industrial and economic scale. Next, I opened your eyes to the exploitations within this industry and its multifaceted effects. And finally, I showed you how we can achieve sustainable fishing practices and humane workers' rights. These issues grate on our minds. They make us wonder if humanity will ever not be cruel. But there is hope in our future. We just need to turn that hope into action.
The middle? The middle? So I'm gonna do an informative. My informative is about organ trafficking, and I have 10 minutes to inform you about that. So, in the foothills of the Himalayas lies a small village of Hoksay, Nepal, that has earned the nickname Kidney Valley. At least one person in each household has had their kidneys illegally harvested and sold. In 2022, the National Library of Medicine reported that over 500 villagers had had their kidneys sold for as little as $200. Driven by desperation and poverty, many carry the scars and side effects of their challenges into their daily lives. Take Santosh, for instance. This 19-year-old Nepalese man had many dreams and aspired to escape his mundane lifestyle in his small rural village. In the summer of 2022, he was lured by two men who came to his village with a new job opportunity in New Delhi, India. Over the next several weeks, he was illegally trafficked into India, where doctors conducted an illegal surgery and harvested one of his kidneys. Organ trafficking is a black trade where human lives are worth nothing more than a pound of flesh. To understand this dark trade further, we will first delve into what organ trafficking is. Then, we will dive deeper into the inner workings of how organ black market functions. And finally, let's discover more about the victims and how they're targeted and affected. Organ trafficking is a pervasive problem that has morphed into a multi-billion-dollar industry. First, it is important to understand what exactly constitutes organ trafficking. The Commercial Service Brief, published in December 2021, defines organ trafficking as an illegal trade of human organs, in which human organs are bought and sold outside of legal frameworks. This involves harvesting organs from individuals often without consent or in unethical and unsafe conditions. Certain parts of the world are hotspots for organ black market. As per a 2024 article from Deutsche Welle, a German press company, regions in South Asia and Northern Africa are main hubs for finding victims. These regions face extreme rate of poverty and lack education, creating an atmosphere ripe for finding victims. As demonstrated by a case report from Healthcare Science Journal, transplant tourism is a specific branch of organ trafficking. Transplant tourism is when subjects travel to a different country to receive organ transplants, often to bypass long waiting lists or restrictions in their home country. This involves traveling to countries with shorter waiting lists, looser regulations, and a thriving black market for human organs. Transplant tourism sprung from a global shortage of legally available organs. According to the United Networks for Organ Sharing, or UNOS, 104,000 people are waiting for an organ transplant right now in the United States. That is the case for Kenneth Pesley from New York. He has been waiting for a kidney transplant for over 5 years. Wealthy patients are willing to pay high prices to access life-saving organs, even if that requires unethical practices. Next, let's dive deeper into the inner workings of how organ black market functions. According to a 2024 article from the Australian government, organ black market functions like a supply chain with different roles and players at each stage. The recruiters are the first point of contact. They identify individuals in lead positions, such as the poor, refugees, or those in debt. In many cases, recruiters are part of local communities, making them more trusted. Technology also plays a huge role in the recruiting process. Networks often use encrypted dark websites to advertise and negotiate deals. These recruiters connect desperate patients to organ sellers or brokers. Brokers are a well-connected, corrupt link to medical professionals and officials. They handle the logistics of the trade, including payment, transport, and arrangements for the surgery. According to an Indiana University professor Peter Andrews article published in November 2023, the majority of the profit is kept by the brokers,
the corrupt officials, and medical professionals, leaving the donors with little to nothing in financial compensation. For example, a kidney donor might get from $1,000 to $3,000, while the recipient might have to pay from $100,000 to $300,000 for the same transplant. Transporters are the final link in the chain. They make sure that the harvested organs are moved quickly and safely to the recipients. This involves smuggling organs across borders in specialized containers to keep them in good order. These networks are run by a combination of greed and exploitation, wherein the rich and the powerful are the only ones to benefit. Finally, let's uncover more about the victims and how they're targeted and affected. According to a 2024 article from the U.S. Department of State, organ trafficking targets individuals in economically disadvantaged or marginalized communities. In some regions, organs are harvested from prisoners, including political prisoners. Victims may sign documents they don't understand, unknowingly agreeing to organ removal. Traffickers may also promise victims employment, education, and migration opportunities in exchange for an organ donation, which are never delivered. In other cases, victims who cannot repay debt may be forced to give up an organ as a payment. Financial consequences aren't the only ramification of the organ trade. Many don't understand the full implications or the long-term healthcare risks because they're illiterate or lack awareness of the process. The International Society of Nephrology explains that in many cases, individuals are falsely told they have a medical condition requiring a surgery during which an organ is removed without their knowledge. That was the case for Deva Borsi from Kolkata, India. He was told that he was getting simple blood work done, during which doctors illegally drugged him and harvested one of his kidneys. Based on coordination against trafficking in persons study done in December 2022, severe mental and physical health consequences plagued many victims for many years to come. Poor surgical measures caused infections, organ failures, and in some cases, even death. Many experienced guilt, shame, and long-term psychological distress, such as depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder due to the trauma of the trafficking. There is no shortage of negative side effects for the victims of organ trafficking. Billions and billions of dollars are poured into this dark trade each year, resulting in thousands and thousands of illegal trade. To understand this dark trade further, we first delve into what organ trafficking is. Then, we dove deeper into the inner workings of how organ black market functions. And finally, we discovered more about the victims and how they are targeted and affected. Santosh, who had sold his kidney for $200, was sent back to Nepal. He once again is poor, jobless, and now with a chronic deficiency. The only work he can find pays him less than $2 a day, and he no longer is the healthy man he once used to be. Organ trafficking is something that not an average American usually thinks about, but it is a real problem that affects many lives across the country.
So I guess we're waiting for Zuri. I don't think she knows that we're waiting for her, so.
No one else.
can do critiques when I do mine. How are you?
No. Good. It got big and better.
Oh, I'm sorry. Why? I'm right?
Yeah.
It's already gotten better.
Was that not? Oh, yeah, no, because I was trying to memorize it, yeah.
Even like the. Huh?
Yeah, okay. I was, she told me.
You wanna
to
sit
wait
up
for
for
her. Tom?
I just need to make sure she didn't make sure.
Mine isn't gonna be that long.
Did you tell her that you were coming?
There's our there.
Okay, because we've got like a couple of cases, just a reminder to silence your cell phones. Don't get up and leave during the speech. Yeah, and just be respectful. Thank you.
So I do poetry. I have 6-minute minimum and an 8-minute maximum with a 30-second leeway. So that's about it. It's not gonna be good, but sure.
It'll be great.
The free bird leaps in the back of the wind, riding the current as it claims the sky, dipping its wings into the orange sun's glow, free to roam wherever it may go. But the caged bird is trapped in its sorrow, beats its wings against the bars of the rage, longing for freedom it cannot taste, singing with a fearful trill, unknown, yet still desired. Voice rising, floating, a cry on the distant field. For the free bird thinks of the world as its own, the breeze of its companion, the fat worms it feasts. The sky is an open stage for its flight. But the caged bird stands on the edge of great dreams, shadow, casting a spirit, the mouth open in song. The caged bird sings of freedom. Leonardo da Vinci once said, "It's easier to resist at the beginning than it is at the end." When we come across obstacles in our lives, we cannot wait to resist. It will only make things harder at the end. We had to fight against the fate, against the odds, against any outside forces that are trying to bring us down, tear us apart. Through the poems Caged Bird by Maya Angelou, we feel the constraints of whatever's keeping us confined. A cage unbound by an unknown, we break free into new unfound freedom. Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night by Dylan Thomas. We learn the importance of continuing to fight on. If We Must Die by Claude McKay. We fight until the very end. Freedom by Braden Trago. Freedom and how it feels to be free. Resistance, a poetry program. But the cage bird stuck down its narrow cage concealed him those bars of rage. His wings are clipped, his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. For the cage bird sings with a fearful trill, unknown, yet still longed for. A cry on the distant hill. The cage bird sings of freedom. Within these bars, my spirit strains a captive heart with aching pains. The world outside, a vibrant hue. I am trapped with skies so blue. But now I rise with an unbent, my soul aflame, a fierce intent. The bars that held me start to fray away as I break free and claim my day. With wings unclipped, I take flight, soaring high into the light. The cage behind me, a distant sight. For my freedom won with all my might. Do not go gentle into the good night, for the darkness comes and calls you soon. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. While men know their time is near, learn too late the dark is right. So they rage, rage against the dying of the light. For the words have yet to spark, like lightning in the midnight sky. Good men and their good deeds dancing frail green wing. Cry out how bright their acts could have shone. So they rage, rage against the dying of the light. While men who chased the sun and sang its golden flight, learn to wait that it slipped away. So they rage, rage against the dying of the light. Great men and the visions burn in the final sight. See beyond the veil and know their fire still lingers. So they rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my thought, standing on the highest crest, cursed and bless me with your burning tears. But yet, do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. If we must die, let it not be like hogs hunted and penned in an inglorious spot, while around us they mock and the mad and hungry dogs, making them mock at our cursed lot. If we must die, oh, let us nobly die, so that our precious blood may not be shared in vain. Even the monsters we defy can be constrained to honor us, though dead. O kinsmen, we must meet the common foe. Through for outnumbered, let us show bravery, for there 1,000 blows deal one death blow. What thou before us lies an open grave, like men will face the murderous, cowardly pack. Pressed to the wall, dying, but fighting back. Freedom, for the fear is freedom I claim for you, my mother. Freedom from the burden of the ages, bending your head, breaking your back, blinding your eyes to the beckoning call. Freedom from the shackles where you fasten in the night stillness, mistrusting the star that speaks of truth's adventurous past. Freedom from the anarchy of the dynasty whose sails are weakly yielded to the uncertain winds and held the hand as cold, as rigid, as death. Freedom from the insult of the dwelling of a puppet's world where movements are started through brainless wires, repeated through mindless habits, where figures wait with patience and obedience to be stirred in the mimicry of life. You have one more. Are you just gonna say anything? What? Reason why I didn't want you guys to show up. I saw you wonder, but phone. See that? Go ahead, go to this class.
informative. So. December 24th, 2020, Nashville, Tennessee. My history teacher sat around the dining table with his children and smaller grandchildren. He described the feeling of warmth in his chest and the childlike joy for Christmas. When he awoke the next day, he saw smoke billowing from downtown Nashville, an area he was all too familiar with. He called his daughter, knowing his son-in-law's business was downtown, where she told him their business had been destroyed as part of a terrorist attack. A lunatic who wanted to send a message to the local AT&T in protest of deep state and 5G conspiracies. Welcome to an introduction to terrorism in America, a guide to 3 critical points to gaining a deeper knowledge of terrorism in our country. To begin, we will understand the current state of terrorism in the United States. Next, we'll discover just who commits these crimes and why. And finally, we'll understand how this has affected the public. Terrorism holds the United States in its palm like a Venus flytrap to a fly, ever threatening to close its jaws and consume us whole. First, to understand terrorism in the United States, we must know the current state of it. As cited by the FBI, terrorism can be split into 2 broad categories: international and domestic terrorism. International terrorism can be defined as violent criminal acts perpetrated by people or groups affiliated with foreign terrorist groups. Domestic terrorism can be similarly defined by violent criminal acts perpetrated by people or groups, but are done to further domestic, religious, social, racial, and even environmental beliefs, and has become more prevalent with each passing year. Homeland Security states that terrorists are more likely to attack institutions rather than individuals. For example, the National Library of Medicine states in 1984, when abortion terrorism was at its peak with 29 attacks, 98% were on facilities providing abortions. The CSIS states in a 2020 article that in the 70s and 80s, explosives were the most common type of weapon used, but the rate of lone perpetrators using firearms has only gone up. One may think that the most common type of terrorist attack in the United States are mass shootings. But interestingly enough, most mass shootings are not considered terrorist attacks. As previously stated, terrorists must have a belief they're trying to spread behind their violent acts, and many mass shootings lack any rational thought behind them. This is how only certain mass shootings may be considered terrorist attacks. The Institute of Peace and Economics has ranked countries on a scale of 1 to 10 on how prevalent terrorism is within their country. The United States finds itself in 30th place, with a score of 4.14, placing us below countries like Iraq, Pakistan, and Israel, but above countries like the United Kingdom, Russia, and Mexico. These figures put together create an image of terrorism currently in the US, but the question of who commits these crimes and why is yet to be known. There is a common belief among Americans that Muslims are most likely to commit terrorist attacks. The Pew Research Center states that 49% of Americans believe Islam is more likely to encourage violence among its followers. But the Center of Strategic and International Studies states that far-right terrorism has been the most common type of terrorism since 1994, outnumbering attacks inspired by the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. In fact, the Global Terrorism Index states that there has been a 320% increase in far-right extremism in the past 6 years, taking up 2/3 of the attacks in 2019 and 90% of the attacks in the first half of 2020. The CSIS states there are many reasons for this rise in far-right extremism. The shifting political landscape, such as Barack Obama and Donald Trump's elections, migration, and COVID-19, have both invigorated and aggravated these extremist groups. This process of events that leads someone to hold such strong or extreme beliefs can be described by one term. Science Direct explains radicalization is the leader in creating terrorists and terrorism. There are 2 schools of thought widely regarding radicalization. One being that radicalization opens one up to accepting radical ideas, and the other being that radicalization actively pushes someone towards being willing to or committing violent crimes. By both definition, terrorism opens up an individual to either accepting or committing these crimes. Now that we understand just who commits these crimes and why, it is imperative to know how this has affected the public. The National Library of Medicine states that terrorism has the ability to corrode a sense of community and national security, damage morale, and open cracks in social systems in America. The most devastating terrorist attack happened on September 11, 2001. This was a day of not only immense loss, but a day where the American lens of the world was permanently altered. As a result, the FBI reports the attacks on American Muslims going up from 48 in 2000 to 481 in 2011, a more than tenfold increase. This is an example of how terrorism can fuel divides that already exist in America. After 9/11, the country not only mourned as one, but also rallied as one. Following President Bush into Iraq for the next nearly 20 years, terrorism has been a tool for politicians to yield for years. Brookings Institute quotes Senator Arthur Vandenberg in 1947 to President Truman that, "Mr. President, if you want this, you're going to have to make a speech and scare the hell out of this country." Politicians today use terrorism as a way to further their campaigns, shifting the focus onto international terrorism rather than domestic. Donald Trump currently states in the White House that one of his initiatives is to protect Americans from international threats and public safety threats. This statement is straightforward, but the question stands as to why his campaign does not focus on the far more frequent type of terrorism, domestic terrorism. Terrorism has not only the ability to change things throughout society, but also within the government. The International Philadelphia Airport states post 9/11, many things changed. The Airport and Transportation Security Act, passed on November 19, 2001, allowed many of these changes to occur. Many in my generation will not remember it, but there used to be no need to take off your shoes, your belt, or even size requirements in the liquids you bring on planes. As illustrated by the effects after 9/11, terrorism has the ability to spread across state lines and into the hearts and lives of many. December 25th, 2020, Nashville, Tennessee, was not a day of mass casualty, but of a shocking message. Anthony Quinn Warner parked his RV in front of the local AT&T with hundreds of pounds of explosives. He played a pre-recorded message over the loudspeaker warning all residents to evacuate. He detonated his explosives, effectively killing himself, his dog, and destroying the local businesses. This was an introduction to terrorism in America, a guide to 3 critical points to gaining a deeper knowledge of terrorism in our own country. To begin, we reviewed the current states of terrorism in the United States. Next, we discovered just who commits these crimes and why. And finally, we understood how this has affected the public. My teacher tells me how the night before felt like a day they wouldn't trade the world for, only to have this sense of fullness ripped away from them on Christmas. It's twisted, he told me. Demented, vengeful, misguided. No. Terrorism in America is just that. It's twisted. As long as we remain Americans, terrorism will paint our history books and our headlines, and continues to affect the culture of America every day.
I do informative. It's too early in the morning to be doing this level of algebra. Your eyes are drooping as you're trying really hard not to yawn your way through this class period. Then you hear a strange noise. A loud bang, then another and another. Panic starts to spread through the room as you try to imagine what that sound could possibly be. Then a lockdown announcement comes over the speakers. This is your worst nightmare. The Sandy Hook Promise states that every day 12 children die of gun violence in America. Another 32 are shot and injured. Unfortunately, most of these happen on K through 12 school grounds. In order to know more about school shootings in America, we must first look at the statistics to gun violence. Next, we'll look at what motivates people to use their gun rights. And lastly, we'll compare American school shootings to school shootings around the world. The more we know about gun violence in America, the more we can see this recurring problem. First, we'll take a look at the statistics. According to the K through 12 school shooting database, updated in January 2025, only 43% of school shooters are students, while the remaining 57% are adult shooters. This data reveals that this issue extends beyond the students. It's also driven by the outsiders. What happens to those guilty of terrorizing innocent kids and adults? Well, this database also shows that 40% fled and escaped, leaving the parents of the victims without closure. Additionally, 33% fled but were eventually caught. 7% surrendered and are serving time in prison. And the remaining 20% died by their own hands or the hands of others. According to the statistical website, there have been 392 public and 24 private school shootings in the last 3 years. Furthermore, a December 16, 2024 article from CNN reported that there have been 83 school shootings in 2024 alone, with 27 of those being on college campuses and 56 being on K through 12 school grounds. The top 4 most common times during the day where these tragic events happen were morning classes with 406, 341 with sporting events, 304 at dismissal, and 271 occurred during afternoon classes. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, found that roughly 98% of school shooters are male, with their median age being 16 years old. Additionally, 54% were carried out through white adolescent males. Additionally, 42% obtained a firearm through a relative, mostly through theft. 30% obtained it from a street or an illegal market. 22% from a friend, 5% from a stranger, and 2% were obtained legally. Next, we'll look at what motivates people to use their gun rights. One factor is the offender's mental health. While this may not be a big contributor as the news media outlets and politicians make it out to be, according to the Columbia University study, states that only 5% of school shootings involve mental illness, with the 2 main cited conditions are schizophrenia and psychosis. A much larger factor is these assailants seek fame or recognition. A June 2023 article from RAND, an organization that develops solutions to public policy challenges, states that since 2010, most assailants exhibited narcissistic traits or heightened desires for attention. This, according to the National Health Institute, when news media outlets and politicians cover mass shootings or shootings in general, they include in-depth details about the shooter's life. Repetition of this information, along with the play-by-plays of how the event unfolded, makes the shooter seem competent and project the feeling of success. This not only vindicates the shooter's plan and manifesto, but also encourages other people with similar mindsets to carry out through their own plans. They call this the contagious effect, meaning the coverage of these mass shootings inspire them to spread. The official FBI website shares a documentary called The Echoes of Columbine. This documentary explains how shooters used the Columbine shooting as a blueprint for what they want to happen. They call this the Columbine effect. As a result, there have been 80 copycat attacks since 1999. While many might think mental health is a leading contributor to school shootings in America, it is fame or notoriety is a true culprit. Lastly, we'll compare American school shootings to school shootings around the world. According to the K-12 school shooting database, states that there have been 2,975 school shootings in the United States, whereas other countries combined have only experienced 1,254. We have account for almost double that total. The World Population Data from 2009-2018 states that there have been 288 school shootings in the United States. The next closest country is Mexico with only 8, and Australia has never had a school shooting. Statistica notes that gun permits vary from state to state. Some states might have a much stricter application process in order to purchase a firearm. Some states might not. There's also open carried or concealed carry permits in the U.S. Mexico only allows gun ownership if the weapon remains at the owner's house at all times. This means there's no open carried or concealed carry permits in Mexico. One factor is how the individual countries address this issue. Australia, for example, it only took one major mass mall shooting for action to be taken when they banned guns in 1996. For example, Australia, the United Kingdom, it only took one major school shooting for action to be taken. A June 2022 article from NPR describes a mass shooting in Scotland occurred on March 1996. This is by far the deadliest mass shooting in UK history. After this tragedy, parents mobilized. By the next year, Parliament banned private ownership of most semi-automatic and handguns and required restrictions for shotguns. Since this legislation has passed, there have been a total of 0 school shootings in the UK. The United States is unique in at least one way. Our love for guns outweighs the love to keep our American school children safe. Dozens of students and teachers die to gun violence in America every year. It is a problem that has persisted for decades and does not seem that there's an end in sight. It is one of America's greatest plagues and is a uniquely American phenomenon to American culture. To better understand school shootings in America, we first look at the statistics. Next, we have looked at what motivates people to abuse their gun rights. And lastly, we have compared American school shootings to school shootings around the world. Every child deserves to feel safe in their place of learning. Yet, the haunting reality shatters this fundamental right, leaving scars on our communities and our hearts.
3 topics and I choose one and I get 1 hour to write a 4 to 7 minute speech. $7.5 million children in the United States receive special education services, as indicated by the National Center for Education Statistics. These 7.5 million children receive help from the Department of Education. But what if the Department of Education is taken away from this 7.5 million children? What would happen to them? Today, I was presented with a similar question. How would the abolishment of the Department of Education affect special education students? To answer that question, we will first look at the inconsistent enforcement of special education laws that would occur. Then we will discover more about the uncertainties in funding that these kids would face. And finally, we'll delve into the weakened advocacy and protection for children. The Department of Education is a key resource, and if it is taken away from special education students, they're going to face challenges they have never even imagined before. First, it is important to understand the inconsistencies in enforcement of special education laws. As per the National Education Association article published on February 4, 2025, the Individual with Disability Education Act, IDEA, is a federal law that ensures children with disabilities receive free and appropriate education, FAPE. The Department of Education is responsible for overseeing and ensuring that this law at the federal level is put into place. Without federal oversight individual states would be left to enforce the laws for themselves, which could lead to inconsistency in how special education students are provided education across the country. As per the Education Week article published on November 18, 2024, families in states with fewer resources or less robust enforcement might find it harder to access the services their child needs, leading to inequality in education for special education students. An example of this was provided in the article by the National Education Association. Families in states, a family with a child, for example, a child in a state that doesn't prioritize special education might face delays in receiving necessary accommodations, while a child in a well-funded state may receive all the necessary services. This is going to leave a huge gap to education progress. Next, we will look at the uncertainties in federal funding that many students may face. As per the Center for American Progress article published on July 25, 2024, the Department of Education administrates federal funds to support special education programs under the IDEA. These funds help pay for specialized teachers, equipment, therapy services, and other needed resources. As per the U.S. News and World Report's article published on February 7, 2025, if the Department of State is abolished, the federal government might reduce or eliminate funding, leaving schools and school districts to afford the entire cost. Many schools rely heavily on federal funds to meet the needs of students with disabilities, especially those in low-income or rural areas. Lastly, we will look at the weakened advocacy and legal protection that these students are going to face. As per the Century Foundation's article published on February 12, 2025, the Department of Education plays a key role in advocating for the rights of students and ensuring their legal protections are served under the federal law. Without the Department of Education, there would be a less controlled advocacy for students at the national level. As per a Forbes article published on November 12, 2024, if a school fails to provide appropriate accommodations for students with autism, the family might struggle to obtain the legal support they needed to ensure their child's rights are respected. There would be fewer legal policy frameworks to ensure that the schools meet the needs of special education students. Today, I was presented with the question, how would the abolishment of the Department of Education affect special education students? To answer that question, we first look at the abolishment of the Department of Education would likely result in inconsistent enforcement of special education laws, uncertainty in funding, and weakened advocacy and protection for students with disabilities. These changes could lead to disparities in quality of education and services that special education students receive, undermining their ability to thrive academically.
last one.
I bet you'll never guess what event I'm doing. I'm gonna skip that for you. February. It was a cold winter's night. My feet were soaked and my hands were icicles. I trudged merrily back into the warmth of my less than ideal after school job. Just as I'm starting to gain feeling in my fingers, my manager blesses me with the task of restocking the freezer aisle. If I'm remembering correctly, my aisles were 2, 5, and dairy. Derek has the freezer aisle. Why was she asking me? Well, Derek had learned that if he intentionally does a poor job when he's asked to do something, he won't be asked to do it again. Weaponized incompetence is a term that I recently became familiar with. My first bout of research was, of course, my TikTok For You page, but the longer I watched, the more frustrated I got. First, we will define weaponized incompetence and look at some examples. Next, we will unravel the roots and get to the bottom of this behavior. Lastly, we will understand the lasting effects this seemingly simple practice has on relationships. Malicious intent or not, weaponized incompetence is a phenomenon that will ruin our relationships if it goes unaddressed. First, we will define weaponized incompetence and look at some examples. According to an August 2024 Cleveland Clinic article, weaponized incompetence is a psychological dynamic. One person in a relationship may hold a bigger load of tasks due to the other's excuse of competence. One partner may use persuasive manipulation like, you do it better, or I'm just not good at it, to get the other to end up completing the task at hand. Now, this kind of behavior is not only present in romantic relationships, but it can show up in workplaces and platonic relationships. Like a coworker who doesn't stock the freezer aisle right in order to avoid it later, or a friend who forgets their wallet yet again for Sunday brunch, leaving you with the bill. This behavior can be hard to address when we recognize the fact that that incompetence as a weapon can be an unconscious act. For example, a wife asks her husband to fold the towels while she feeds the baby. The husband might comply with this request, but he does it in a sloppy manner. This creates an even harder task for his wife, and over time, the same kind of behavior can lead to a sort of resentment towards each other. If the husband is acting unconsciously, he might feel as if he is trying his best to help out and complete the task his wife requested. If he's acting consciously, though, he might know that his wife will get tired of fixing his messy folding and stop asking for his help. A 2023 article from Psychology Today states that weaponized incompetence is more likely to occur if there is a consistent pattern. meaning a task that is brought up continuously and becomes a part of daily responsibilities, like folding towels or vacuuming. We have all dealt with some kind of weaponized incompetence in our lives. Understanding this behavior is crucial in how we recognize it in our daily interactions. Next, we will unravel the roots and get to the bottom of this behavior. The balance in a relationship can fluctuate. This is a normal occurrence, but in some situations it can be unhealthy. The roots of weaponized incompetence are based on societal norms and expectations. Creating balance in a relationship starts with how we eliminate these unconscious stereotypes. A 2025 Planned Parenthood article states that women are expected to be more accommodating and emotional, while men are more assertive and independent. Exaggerated gender stereotypes can hurt a relationship, especially when it comes to housework. Women are stereotypically placed at home, taking care of the children, cooking, and cleaning, while men are at work. This scenario shifts when we examine the roles today. Many rebel from old societal expectations. A 2023 Inclusion Hub article written by Jeffrey Howard states that gender stereotyping is dependent on context. Each culture, religion, and country develop their own stereotypes. In some circumstances, codependency can play a role in behavior. According to a 2024 medically reviewed article from Psych Central, codependency is where one person in a relationship loses their sense of independence because they feel the need to support the other. One side of the relationship may hold all of the weight because they feel as if it is their responsibility. The other side is completely unaware that their lack of effort is slowly wearing away at their caretaker. Losing the sense of individuality as a person can create an endless cycle of depending on others for purpose. Codependency and weaponized incompetence are the perfect match when it comes to unbalanced relationships. Finally, we will examine the lasting effects this seemingly simple practice has on relationships. Metacognition, or awareness and understanding of one's own thought processes, usually does not hold a strong presence in the relationship. According to an article in the scientific journal Cortex, metacognition is what allows people to feel empathy for their actions. Understanding the effects your actions have on the people around you seems to be a simple task, yet when it comes to complex situations, it can be hard. This capacity reflects one's ability and understanding and their abilities. Each side in the relationship must be able to take a step back and understand the effects their actions have on the people around them. In instances where this dynamic shows up in a workplace, it can slow progress and weaken a team's ability to work together. If the stress of the workload gets to be too much for one person and their best choice is to leave, it creates a whole new problem that could have been easily prevented. In October of 2024, 3.3 million people quit their jobs, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics report. Although incompetent coworkers may not be the main reason, it is very likely to be a common factor. Conducting research on this topic, places like Reddit, blogs, and news articles prove this point by showing the perspective of many people and their struggles with this exact problem. Creating a workplace full of unbalanced workloads can create unnecessary stress and can slowly break down a workforce. If this behavior has such an effect on an entire organization, it is easy to see why it would cause such turmoil in a personal relationship. Watching someone I was supposed to view as a leader at work so easily let behavior like that slide made me realize how effective weaponized incompetence truly is. I quickly learned my place and stopped simply accepting the incompetence of crappy coworkers. Weaponized incompetence is a phenomenon that is so easily overlooked and excused. It can bury its roots deeply into relationship and slowly unravel it over time. Understanding the problem at hand is the first step in improving the future of our relationships, whether it be at home or in the workplace. First, we defined weaponized incompetence and looked at some examples. Next, we unraveled the roots and got to the bottom of this behavior. finally, we examined the lasting effects this seemingly simple practice has on relationships. When it comes to relationships, you must create a stable environment where disagreements do not turn into arguments. Being able to discuss issues like weaponized incompetence can lead to a healthy relationship, not just with your partner, but with yourself. And that's it. That's the last one.
I know, that's the whole time, we're like.
Everyone's like,
I love it.
Anyone with a husband.
That's my favorite
The washer,
thing. When
the
everyone's
dryer,
nodding, like,
I said,
it's
which is the
always,
washer, which is the dryer.
I'm so sorry, but it's always the woman in the
That's
room.
it, that's the one.
Like, they're always like.
Good job.
Thank you.
Nice job.
I'm glad you guys could relate.
Good luck on, what else you?
Well, this was just Tuesday.
Yeah.
So, maybe Monday.
Yeah. Okay. I'll check the picture. So big in his ears. No, I can't find it. And I've got another one here. Let's see that.
Because I don't want to be.
Yeah, we don't need to be on this like this.
Just take care of that.
Oh, he's so angry. That's what he says, that's dad's, he's got dad's thinking face. That's what he does too. All right,
Thank
good
you
luck.
for coming.
It was so good. So good.
I don't usually mess up like that, so.
So much to remember. I do that.
Yeah, I can imagine. When I was doing stuff like that, we got paper to relate. We didn't have to memorize things.
Good luck, good district. Thank you. All right. All right.
Oh my God. Oh.